Welcome to the ACP for AA podcast. ACP for AA is a national education initiative of Hearttones, promoting informed healthcare decision-making through advanced care planning conversations. This special 4-part podcast series highlights conversations with people who are working to close the healthcare disparity gap for African American families and communities. Today's episode is hosted by Terry James Taylor, with special guests Reverend Dr. Sterling King Jr. and Dr. Rosalyn C. King speaking about the power of having an advanced care plan. Let's take a listen now.
It is my pleasure to have Reverend Dr. Sterling King Jr. and Dr. Rosalyn King here with us today. We hope this discussion will help raise awareness about the value of preparing healthcare decisions ahead of time before they become necessary. Reverend Dr. King has had decades of experience in academia, including focus on health services administration and pastoral care. Reverend Dr. King's first church in Maryland was Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and then he served as pastor of Macedonia Baptist Church for 28 years. He is a past president of the Black Ministers Conference of Montgomery County, Maryland, former member of Board of Directors of Community Ministry of Montgomery County, now known as Interfaith Works, and past chair of the Board of Directors of Montgomery Hospice. He is a life member of the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. Rosalyn King has been at the forefront of enhanced pharmacist-patient engagement for more than 5 decades. She received her pharmacy credentials from Duquesne University and the University of Southern California. She also earned a master's in public health from the University of California at Los Angeles. This wife, mother, grandmother, lay leader, and global citizen pharmacist resides in Silver Spring, Maryland, with her husband, the Reverend Dr. Sterling King. In 2017, we did a conference at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and it was one of the first times that we all had the opportunity to work with Dr. Gloria Anderson, an expert in advanced care planning. She authored a booklet to serve as a resource titled The African American Spiritual and Ethical Guide to End-of-Life Care. We may reference this experience and what we learned during the podcast. So let's get started. What is advanced care planning? Advanced care planning is thinking ahead about the type of medical and healthcare decision you would want made for you in the future, especially if you are seriously ill or not able to communicate verbally. And the first question is I have for both of you, do you have an advanced care plan? And how important do you think it is to have one?
Well, the answer to the question is yes.
Definitely.
We have an advanced care planning. Ours may be a little different than what a lot of people have. We have a revocable trust, or revocable trust as some call it. And the revocable trust includes an advanced care plan, along with a lot of other wills, about 4 or 5 different versions of wills. But yes, we have an advanced care plan. And I think it's very important to have such a document.
So it's included as a part of our total, legacy planning process, all of it.
And I love that name, Dr. Rosalyn, legacy planning. That's wonderful. Let me ask, one of the things that we did when we did the workshop with the booklet on advanced care planning, which kind of made it really easy. Did you all feel that the booklet was easy to go through? And during the time that you all were in the midst of doing your advanced care planning, was it cumbersome to you all?
Not particularly. We did our revocable trust back in 2006. And of course, the conference was on October 21st of 2017. So we had a little bit of a head start, I guess, in terms of developing our advanced care plan. We, at the time we sat with the attorney to do that, we went through a lot of, more of the questions and considerations that are set forth here in this document. And we made some decisions back then, which we have not changed really since that time.
And it's also good for people to know that you can change it. It's good to have things in order so you don't have to change it a lot, but you can always go back and make some changes if you like. And what was the hardest part of the form for you all to fill out?
The decision making, which is really not a part of the form per se, but the decisions on what we had to fill out the form with. I mean, our own decision making. Who was it that we wanted? and was they to be trusted and qualified and all of that. And we had to talk that through, and we did. It wasn't just an automatic, okay, well, it's the next person, a sister or a brother. We had to kind of talk it through. So the actual form itself, it was long and complex, but it wasn't that hard.
And I think that's good for people to know. And it's good, I think, also to sit down and fill it out with your loved one, or at least have somebody there so you can bounce questions off of them.
Right.
Did you all do that together?
We did. Yes. Yeah. That was very important, really.
Yeah.
Because we can be presumptuous sometimes, in terms of assuming what the other person might want or prefer, but it's important, I think, to hear it from that individual. And we did do that as we sat together.
There's something in the booklet that encourages someone to hear it from your mouth.
Yes. And I think that is important.
That's so important.
Yes.
That is very important.
In the old days, we'd say from the horse's mouth.
Right. That's right. And what's really important is that whoever you choose, it can be hard. We've also talked about how sometimes people will, or families may think the oldest is the one to do the decision makings, and then you can find that that's not the case.
Yes,
it
may be a friend, it may not be a family member at all.
That's right. Yeah. But you definitely want someone that would be comfortable, in assuming the responsibility, that you can trust, and that would have a certain, I can't call it qualifications, but qualifications. Because if somebody is not comfortable in dealing with healthcare in general, then you definitely would not want them to be, a healthcare agent for yourself. And I had a member of my family did not like to be around sick people, period. And everybody in the family knew that. Everybody knew that. So that was good to know.
Why do you feel it's important to have this information for your loved ones? And what is the difference if you don't have an advanced care planning?
Yeah, I think it's really very important to have an advanced care plan. And I think it's important because I served as a pastor for 28 years. And of course, we've had some losses in our own family. Our only daughter in 1988 and my father at the end of that year, 1988. And but I've worked with a number of, families where they didn't have actually a written thing per se, but where families gather in the hospital, for example, when you know that the person is right near the end of this physical life, and where you're directed to go to a room around a long table, and the doctor comes in and gives all of this information. I'm talking about where there is not not an advanced care plan. And what oftentimes I found was that you have what I call, this is not an appropriate term, but some who just can't let go kind of thing. And they absolutely resist any expression from the physician or the minister, from anyone, to say that, now is the time kind of thing. And really, we had a situation where a person was about 10, 11 days, in that situation. And it was a very challenging, but the other siblings and the wife, they had to be sympathetic, if you will, and considerate of the wishes. But in due time, finally, after 10 or 11 days, the person really came to understand that this really was, medicine had done all it could possibly do. We had a personal, situation. Our own daughter, our one and only daughter, was in the Howard University Hospital for 27 days. She had a rare form of brain cancer, and she had lived with that for about 17 years, which, we didn't know, the doctors didn't know. And it was only when she went into the hospital, she was a student at Howard University at the time. The night that she went into the hospital, they had to do literally that evening, what do they call it? Before they inserted a shunt.
Yeah.
They had to go into the, to the brain and release some of the pressure. But for the next 27, and she spent about 8 hours on the operation table. And after that, she, came out, and they had hooked up to all kinds of fancy machines and all. And they saw that there were some little tremors. And then we had a choice. We had a choice to make. They either had to go back in to try to, see what needed to be repaired, or they had to induce a coma. Now, back to the advanced care planning. We were there, so we were kind of the advanced care planners at the time, because when she went into the hospital, she was 21 years old, healthy. There was absolutely nothing on the horizon that would indicate that that she had this cancerous condition. It was a very rare form of cancer. It grew very slowly, very slowly,
Extremely slowly.
over 17 years, but it had become so commingled with the whole brain structure.
Mhm.
And after some 8 hours on the on the operating table, they were able to remove all that they could, all that they could remove. We had a friend who came out of Los Angeles, out of UCLA. That was where we went to school. UCLA had this fancy brain research center, and they came really to kind of see if everything that was known to medical science at that time that could be done was being done. And it was. I mean, there was no place, else that she could have been where she could have gotten better treatment. We were the advanced care planners on site. So finally what happened, they did something they called the
test.
the challenge test. It's a challenge test where they had a neurologist, neurophysicist, had about 4 people, and they hooked up to some fancy equipment. And as it was explained to us, what they would do then, they would momentarily disconnect the brain, the breathing, the whole ventilator system. And if there was still any life in the brain stem, there would be this sort of urge to try and breathe. You couldn't see it, but that machine would pick it up. And if that machine, all those fancy machines, did not pick up any, attempt at breathing, then the brain stem, you could safely see that, okay, this individual is deceased. It's the end of the line.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when we, after we got that, those results, we were there when those results were administered. We were not in the room, but we were, in the waiting room. And then we felt a level of comfort. And of course, we had the chaplain from Howard University who came and did the last rites. At that point, I took our young son, he was 9 years of age at the time. And that was our way of saying that go. But we spent, for those 27 days, one of us was there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
24 hours a day, 7 days
Because,
a week.
when I was teaching in the daytime, she was there, so it worked out. But in due time, the Lord brings you to a point where you come to accept
Mhm.
that it is God who gave, and it is God who has come to take it away.
Amen.
And it is He who teaches us how to say, blessed
Give a name.
be
Bless the Lord.
Lord. Yes.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing that story with us. That's why we always say, when we're younger, those are the last thing on your mind. When you have children, that's the last thing on the mind. And so that is why we want to try to start the conversation as early as possible. I think sometimes we can have the conversation unknowingly or unbeknownst to someone, just asking particular questions, although you're young, would you want this? Would you want that? And just try to extract as much information. And I guess I'm only assuming at this point, but with minors, I would assume that that's what we could, as parents, write down.
Mhm.
But the importance of having that advanced care plan, everyone just heard the importance of it, and you all had to do the work right then and there. And I want to move to, why is it so important for African Americans to be knowledgeable on advanced care planning? Because a lot of pieces go with that, and to have power over our lives and what we want done. We know over the years it's been mistrust in the healthcare system and different things like that. That's another reason why the booklet was created, because it comes from a lot of aspects from our African American roots and heritage.
Well, I've had blessed opportunities to work in many other countries. And I've always noticed that when people in other places, they're ill, the family gathers around them, and that familial support is a support, for their healing, for their comfort, for their care. And we have always done that as well as a people here in the United States. And I found that there was a time in healthcare in this country when, you didn't tell the family as much and you didn't want them to know the details. Thank goodness that has now changed. And thank goodness, people who are in medicine, who are in healthcare, are trained now to be more open with how they make the decisions for care of a patient, why they make it, and what the process is going to involve. And so that's one of the reasons, to me, that it's important, for people to know about advanced care planning, because we want our families to know everything they need to know to have a good level of comfort in their care. Mm-hmm. And that knowledge becomes power for them. So that's why I think it's important. Yes, we could talk about the health disparities and what happened in the Tuskegee experiment, et cetera, but right now, at this point in time, we need people to know, what's open to them, what knowledge they need in order to support and forward their own care. Right. As I said earlier, from their mouth.
Right. And empower themselves.
It's an empowerment, yes.
Mm-hmm.
You are listening to the ACP for AA podcast. More coming up after this quick break.
There are so many forms out there on advanced directives. How do I decide which to fill out? It can seem overwhelming. The most important thing about the advanced directive is that it indicates your healthcare wishes and identifies your healthcare agent. There are many forms available. You can find your state's form through your state attorney's office or visit acp4aa.org.
Montgomery Hospice and Prince George's Hospice is a nonprofit healthcare organization that provides hospice care to residents of Montgomery and Prince George's counties in Maryland. Our interdisciplinary team includes physicians, nurses, spiritual counselors, hospice aides, bereavement care, and volunteers. And we also provide complementary therapies. To learn more about our services, please call 301-921-4400 or visit us at www.montgomeryhospice.org.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that my wife just said. I would also, though, and this may seem to point in a slightly different direction, that this COVID-19 pandemic has turned a lot of things upside down. 18 or 20 months ago, there are people who would have said, no, don't put me on a ventilator, or, do not intubate me. But the whole idea now of intubation and providing ventilator services to patients now is commonplace. As a matter of fact, I think that if a person, a COVID-19 positive patient, were to be admitted to a hospital and a ventilator is available and intubation is indicated as a possible option for prolonging life, failure on the part of the hospital to execute those procedures, it seems to me, would possibly open up that institution to a risk management challenge. I'm saying that to say this. I think that some of our definitions of what end of life is all about and what advanced care planning is all about, some of these things are probably in the process of being, to some extent, sort of reconsidered. Again, because there are people who are feeding, tubular feeding, and who are getting, again, services through the ventilators, which just 2 years ago would not have been a part of the equation.
Right.
So I think we have to take all of that into consideration now. So when we're filling out a healthcare and advanced care plan today, do you want to be intubated or do you want to be put on a ventilator? Now the answer might be, it depends. What my diagnosis is, or what the prognosis is, and if the diagnosis should perchance be COVID-19, if there's one available. Now we know some states in this nation where apparently they have sort of exhausted their supply of some of these equipment items, and therefore, the physicians have to make a choice. If you have 3 patients needing a ventilator and you only have 2 ventilators available, somebody has to make a call. And they have certain ethical protocols and criteria that they sort of go through in terms of trying to make the, quote, very best and most defensible decision possible.
And those will be some hard decisions to have to make. And I guess it would be helpful for them if those 3 people in per se had an advanced care plan.
It would, yes,
would help them out quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a strong supporter of advanced care plan. I just want that to be advanced care planning. I don't know if I've indicated that very clearly before. I personally, support that. But again, I think this whole COVID-19 pandemic is kind of redefining the psychological orientation that people have towards some of these issues. Advanced care planning is an important way of approaching the realities of life. We need to embrace the realities of life. And one of those realities is that life will come to an end.
Absolutely.
without any ifs or ands or buts. And in due time, you will leave this earthly house and you're going somewhere.
But you're right. That is absolutely right. And being able to help make the decision as to how we want to live our last days is very important. And that's the importance of having an advanced care plan. So many, and I would say to you, Dr. Rosalyn, you had mentioned that you're a pharmacist. I can only imagine how it could be in certain other countries or even here in the United States, all of the myths about the different meds. And I know we have to do a lot of training in our environment sometime on the morphine. So I would like to pose a question to you when it comes to the different medicines that people are fearful of. How can that be wrapped into as well in the advanced care plan?
Well, I don't know if I'm at the point where I can speak to the specific medicines because I'm not an oncology pharmacist, of which there are many. But I really think that there are many myths associated with the use of some of the drugs, such as morphine, because we have heard so many things about it in terms of its relationship to street drugs, its relationship to just the whole aspect of narcotics. But people don't understand the wisdom of its use at this particular time in life. And see, when you're doing advanced care planning, that's a point of knowledge that can be pulled in to have people understand. Right now, there is not that level of comfort in many communities with the use of medications during the end of life. And I think that does need to be increased. Some of my colleagues that I speak with from time to time, because I'm not in a clinic, I'm not behind a pharmacy counter, I'm not dispensing, and I'm not in direct patient care any longer. So, they're wondering, well, now, why is such a, quote, heavy dose being prescribed? Or why is it for such a long period of time? And so I do think there needs to be an increased understanding, not only among, the professional community as a whole, pharmacists in particular, but especially patients. Because I think that what happens is they are told this is a medication that can ease your pain, period. From a pharmacist's point of view, people need to know more about the medication than they now know.
Okay. And I have a question for both. First, I'm going to ask Reverend King, but I want to also talk to Dr. Rosalyn as being a first lady. I'd like to know, how would you prepare your members when it comes to end of life decision making, or in so many instances, sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, plans have not been made?
Mm-hmm.
And how would your help?
Yeah, well, I think my own experience has been kind of in a threefold expression. One is for 28 years, I served as a pastor, and I'm a retired pastor now. I'm retired in 2016, but I still preach. So the threefold thing would be, number one, from time to time, you're able to just remind the audience, everybody who is a part of that congregation on that occasion, that this earth is not our permanent home, that we all carry this treasure in an earthen vessel. And there is a part of us that will decay in due time. But we go back to the Genesis account. God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So there is a part of us that will go back to earth, and Genesis reminds us of that, because we came from it. But there's a part that will not. And so there's an eternal dimension to this dual nature that we have. We're body and soul, physical and spiritual, human and divine. Somebody said we're dirt and deity. And so it's this deity part, this God-breathed part that will live on. In order to have comfort in this divine, in this next stage, if you will, that in that eternal stage, there are certain things that we have to do on this side while we're here. I'm a Christian, I'm a part of the Baptist denomination, and we believe that in order to have a wonderful, joyful, peaceful eternity with the God who made us, that we have to accept him while the blood is still running warm in our veins. And we have this information recorded in the scriptures, Romans 10, verses 9 and 10. If thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in thine heart that God has raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. So from the Christian point of view, you have, this is the second dimension here, that you have an eternal home, and that eternal home is going to be with God Almighty who made you. You know, you got two parts. How do I prepare my audience for that? Through some sermons. How do I prepare my audience for that here? And then when I'm around the table, as I've been on various occasions with the family and the doctor, the head of the table, trying to really give all of the appropriate information to the family. And if you speak right at the end, because sometimes you have, among family members, something less than a consensus. So whether now is today, now, should we pull the plug or is it tomorrow? I've seen that I've had this go different ways. Sometimes, it may be another before the end of the day, next 24 hours, but once, up to 10, 11 days, and finally, it was put. But one of the good things from that, though, is that a sense of unity, I think, was preserved in the family, because I've seen also some occasions where, somebody felt that it was short-circuited and there were some emotional scars, I guess, that were inflicted. There was something that was inflicted that took a while before the communications got restored. And that's what you really want to try and avoid. In the final analysis, if they don't have an advanced care plan, if there's not been any advanced care planning, then they're doing it on the spot there, and that is not always an easy thing. There's a degree of emotionality that comes in, maybe some hidden issues, not hidden, they're hidden from the pastor, but there's other issues that kind of related to some family history that you're not aware of that may come into play, and so you don't want none of that stuff to come in. I mean, you want to try and keep it as focused as you can. This is when you're doing it on the spot without any prior planning.
And the way that his spouse works is in support, because sometimes when people are going through this level of decision making, sometimes they just need to know they're not the only ones that have to go through these steps, that there have been others, and they need to know what others have experienced, and we can share our experience. There was one occasion where a good friend of ours lost her husband unexpectedly, and all we could do was just go and be with her and just sit with her through the night and just be there. It's what my husband often calls the ministry of the presence.
Yes.
Just being there.
There's a fear factor that is involved in some of this advanced care planning discussion. I think some people may feel that if you start talking about what you want to take place, when you're at a point where you're not able to talk or, to make decisions for yourself, some people might feel that somehow that might help to sort of hasten or bring on this condition, may hasten your illness or your death.
Good point.
You have to recognize that you don't have all of the answers. It's not, you're not the end all be all, nor does anybody else in that room, including the doctor.
Right.
But as a Christian, that you want to be a peacemaker in that whole process as best as you can. And again, you lean not to your own understanding, but upon God. He's going to give you what you need at that hour.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And as we start winding down, one of the questions I wanted to pose to both of you, in taking the advanced care planning workshop, what was your takeaways from that? What can you share with the audience that you felt was very good about it, or any improvements or anything like that? What did you glean from that workshop?
I thought it was an excellent workshop. I really, really did. It was held at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Rockville, Maryland, and it was a very excellent workshop. The main presenter, Dr. Gloria Thomas Anderson, was well prepared, had her information laid out in an excellent, easy to understand way. There was a dialogue feature that was there. In other words, the audience, it wasn't just a one-way thing all the while. The people could, along the way, people could raise questions, get their questions answered, or get other responses from other members who might have had different views on it. I thought it was an excellent workshop. From A to Z, from the beginning to the end. That's my personal view of it.
It was one. I had heard about advanced care planning, as we said, much earlier. But to have a workshop that kind of brought it home to the African American community, I thought was just superb. So whoever's idea it was to formulate it in such a way as to make it specific to our culture was what I thought was the linchpin of it all. And to me was the takeaway. The points that were covered were points that I had heard many times from many people, and that the subtitle, "What y'all gonna do with me?"
Yeah.
we heard so many times. So I was very happy to see it organized in that fashion, really. And I have told people about it, and I've told people about the booklet. I haven't given them one, and I should, but I've just told them about it.
See, advanced care planning is now in a more formal phase and stage. But I think we have, as a people, African Americans, we have in one way or another, to some degree or another, been sort of involved in this over a period of time. My father, who died in 1988, same year that our daughter died, he had indicated that he wanted to take his final breath at home. He knew it, mother knew it. He made that very clear. And my youngest brother, he's 11th child. Next to when Daddy, right towards the end in that distress thing, he panicked. I won't say panicked, man, that made it. But anyway, he called the ambulance. He called 911. So they came and rushed him to the hospital. It was difficult to restrain him because he's a baby, in the family, and nobody wanted to, quote, I guess, deny. I wasn't there, of course. I was
Everybody else was there.
My mother was there. I think we may have been on the scene at the time, but nobody was there to restrain him from Daddy. He knew that Daddy said he wanted to die in his own bed. That was my father's request. Everybody, we all knew that. But he panicked, and now my mother, when the Lord called her home, she was able to die in her own bed. Because people understood that. And her wish was honored. We had to call the coroner out because we can't move the body until there's in Lee County. Somebody has to, the certain officials have to pronounce that. So that we had to wait for the coroner to come. But I was home at the time when my mother died. I'm saying that we're still saying the best laid plans of mice and men sometimes go astray, So Daddy had his plan laid out, what he wanted. We knew it. He had advanced, it was talking about advanced care planning. He had verbally articulated his plan. I want to take my last breath in my bed, period.
And most people do. Most people do want to be home.
Yeah.
They want to be home.
Yeah. Well, that's my plan right now. I announced to my wife hereby and on this in this program.
Okay. Yeah.
I want to take my last breath in my own bed.
Good.
If we can. If we can.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
If we can.
Yes.
You all both will definitely do everything that you have to do to fulfill each other's wishes. So, like you said, if you can.
Yeah. If the Lord wills, as James
says. If the Lord wills.
Yeah, if the Lord will. So, we're hoping to continue the workshop in other arenas and other churches, and we just want to spread the word of the importance in the African American community for advanced care planning. And you're right, both of you are right. When it came to the pandemic, has been an influx in people filling out their advanced care plan. So, in all the turmoil, there was still something good in having to deal with the pandemic. People started paying attention to what matters most.
Yeah. Well, and people are being asked about it more. They're being asked about it. So health professionals are wising up, so to speak. They're including that in their early discussions, in their encounters with patients. And that is great.
That is great. It is. I'd like to thank Reverend Dr. King and Dr. Rosalyn King for being our guest today. And just to let you know, our website has an area where you can easily access resources to help you start the process.
Thank you for listening to the ACP for AA podcast. We can bridge this disparity gap one individual at a time. First things first, let's talk about it. We encourage you to visit the website at acpforaa.org for more information and resources.